How's everybody doing today? You guys know, we're going to try to make this quick for you, but something I want to clarify first, and even for the panel over here. I would never, ever, ever typically be in a forum like this. We are professional troubleshooters, and that's why I want to show you guys the work that we do. We work for municipalities. We work for military. We work for medicine. We work for special problems that can't be found. As a matter of fact, next week we're going to be flying watersheds for the Department of Fisheries and Oceans because groundwater is considered nature's hidden treasure. We just give them a visual of it. So the reason that I'm actually presenting this now is, and you'll see as we go along here, is I was watching this discussion as an electrical professional on these frequencies not hurting people, and I just didn't hear the electrical language that I liked. So I'm actually going to get into parts of Safety Code 6 and other things related to this. But again, it's really important that I show you guys what we do because it just typically can't be seen before. So I want you guys to understand how specialized this work is. We lecture the dangers of these frequencies in medical education right now. And that is recognized in North America for education credits doctors need for licensing. Now, what I'm going to start with this is, here's what energy losses look like. You know, buildings and municipalities are always trying to save energy. You can see in the top here, here's an infrared image in the top. See the scale to the right-hand side? Those colors are actually off a little bit too, but here's what we see with our visible spectrum. You see that dark area there? That's missing insulation. So here's energy losses. Here's something, more greenhouse gases, more electrical waste, more fossil fuel waste. Next slide. See the bottom part? This is a commercial building here where they said this is only happening in certain types of buildings. Here's a commercial building in Kelowna. You see the top part of the building? It's uninsulated. But they put the heaters on the roof. So they only insulated the showroom down there. So the building is really illegal. It's not complying with code. The equipment's working too hard. And this is actually what we do in troubleshooting for municipalities or professionals. Next one. You guys, here's an example of what we do for the electrical industry. Is that, see this right here? This is a fuse disconnect. And what we will do is we work for mills, mines, lumber, everybody, and we troubleshoot their electrical systems while they're under load so we can catch the problems before they happen. And that's literally what happens here with this connection in that breaker here. So we just point this out to them, and they're insurers ahead of time because they're insured for downtime, so they fix it, they get better insurance rates, and everybody's happy. Next slide. How many people were here in 2003 for forest fires? I was in Kelowna, and when the lightning struck in Peachland, guess what? We contacted them and said, hey, you guys are having trouble seeing that fire. Let us give you a hand with that. We trained our first fire department over 20 years ago. Well, here's what, see this right here? This is when it actually interfaced with Kelowna. See the bottom slide here? Those are the houses, and that's a smoke-filled background. And here our fire departments are fighting this blind. Here's the infrared image up top. And although, again, those colors aren't what I'd like them to be, is you can see that white stuff in the back? That's the forest fire coming to interface with Kelowna. And my job is so horrible sometimes that even in this situation here, we flagged down a police car. And the RCMP officer said, listen, we're patrolling the area. And I said, you better take a look at this. So he took a look at this, and this initiated the evacuation of 15,000 on that day. Next slide. Oh, by the way, in 2003, they also had a public inquiry. Did you guys hear that? This information was edited from the public inquiry. So when we had fires in 2009 in West Kelowna, here they are right here. And again, you can see the fire building on the left-hand side of this, and the fire jumped the highway anyways. But again, the whole idea behind this is to give professionals the ability to see their objective. Next slide, please. How many people have heard of groundwater? I didn't even know what it was. When they sat across from us and said, listen, we need to find some groundwater, how did you see it? And I said, what's the big deal? They said, this is where fish spawn. So this is what it is here. These hot areas right here, this is what I should have learned a long time ago when I went fishing, because that hot area there, those white areas, that's groundwater upwellings within river systems. This is what we want to protect. This is where fish spawn. And this is what we do for just the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, forestry, hydrologists, etc. Next slide. Well, now when it came to imaging people, the infrared industry, the people I buy equipment from, imaged hundreds of millions of people at ports of entry and couldn't produce one image of a flu. Now the reason they couldn't do that is the imaging application exceeded their expertise. So you imagine this, when you go to see your doctor, they're blind. You got that good man or that good woman looking at you and they can't see what the heck is going on. So I wanted to give you an example here. I actually had to meet with Health Canada on this one on the coast and show them, they said, your industry really made a mess for us. And they said, we spent a year and they couldn't produce one image of a flu. And he said, you did an image of a flu just out of curiosity to show us how it worked. Next slide, please. See, and you can't see this. This is really horrible colors in here with this connection, but you can see on this lady's right wrist, this is a workers' compensation claim, and she's got an inflamed wrist, but they don't think she's hurt. So what we do is we build that report for the doctors, for her, and for her claim. Next one. Now this is, again, horrible colors, but this is us critiquing a 50-clinic international group with doctors that do thermography. Now they took this woman's breast images on the left-hand side here, and she called me and she said, they said, hey, this is all good. You're relatively normal. She called me and she said, my mother died from breast cancer. My sister had a breast removed. Would you take a look at the images? And I said, yes. As soon as I looked at them, I said, I disagree. They tweaked the image, and you can see over there, she's got one breast that lit up, and they removed cancerous lumps from the left breast. Next slide. Here's what diabetic neuropathy looks like. See that one foot that's inflamed there? Well, guess what? This guy's foot, he actually just had that foot removed. Because listen, his foot is dying because of lack of nerves. Next slide. See that dark part on her face here? That's what a stroke looks like. Next slide. See this one here, and this is again because for insurance claims. Lots of people are going to a doctor and they're saying, listen, I'm hurt, and the doctor can't see it. So what we do in clinical environments is actually train doctors to, one, look at this, interpret it, use it, and isolate problems so you can help people that need help but also catch insurance fraud. Next one. See the white around the knees there? That's rheumatoid arthritis. Inflammation. Next one. See the top one here? And here, that cord moved a bit. See the cord moved a bit, but okay, keep moving. Yeah, right back there. Okay, right there. See the top one? Here in the bottom one, that's the progression of disease on an infectious bug bite after 24 hours. And just to show doctors, progression of disease or progression of effective treatment. And this is what we do in medicine. And believe it or not, related to the frequency issues as well. Next slide. Now here's where I want to get into this, because even when I heard about this issue, I said, what the heck are you guys doing? You cannot blast frequencies around with reckless abandon. You can't do that because everything in existence is made out of atoms and molecules, and everything has its own frequencies. And here's an example of this in an electrical application where, believe it or not, here's a frequency example causing problems where we told the mill, you got to fix this. Hey, you got to fix this, or guess what? This thing's going to blow up. Now, can you adjust that cable again? See these connections where they're coming through in the top here, and you see the brighter colored ones? Because when we run wires together, the electromagnetic lines of flux cancel each other out with each conductor. So we don't have these EMFs. When we run them separately, all of a sudden, guess what? You've got those EMFs interacting with the metal cabinet. And what's happening is the metal cabinet is trying to change direction and polarize with those frequencies. And because metal can't change direction, it generates heat, which would cause electrical failure. And imagine this, all they end up doing is just putting a little piece of mica board on the top of there and eliminate the problem. But this is just to show you that this really happens with this stuff and with frequencies. It's what they interact with and whether they can interact with it. Next one, please. And I need you to wiggle that cord too if you can. Yeah, I know. This right here is an example of, you guys hear about natural, what you hear from lots of different people again, natural EMFs, correct? Well, here's natural EMFs. Well, that's bad. There you go. Can you hold that and lift your left foot? Here's natural EMFs. You know the same sun, you know why guys like me don't stand out in the sun for a long time? Because guess what? The sun burns us. So you think of this. When I showed you with that electrical component, that's 60 hertz. So that metal is trying to change direction at twice the frequency, 120 times a second. This is what UV did to a cut block. This is an aerial shot where they removed the trees to use those trees. And guess what? We expose the ground to solar radiation, solar EMFs. And it's generating heat when it really shouldn't be generating heat. Next one. This is done in February. This is UV exposure on a very pale person after 8 minutes in February. And you see the differences in their physiology and see how much she's heated up? Next slide, please. UV, something so important even for municipalities when you talk about frequencies, and here it is. These buildings, same as in Penticton, same as in Kelowna, same as anything else, these buildings are designed for a maximum of 33 degrees Celsius. And this is something, even with my work, this contradicted my own education, because we started imaging building development to see what was going on, and we started documenting temperatures as high as 94 degrees Celsius on a building designed for 33. So when we talk about natural EMFs, you have to really be careful with that, because they're not natural. You can see, here's that back one. Arrow key. Over here. Yeah, back, that one. No. The other way. There. You can see here the image on the left-hand side. Here's before sunrise. There's after sunrise. You can see how much UV has impacted it. Next slide. Here's to show you on a building. What we did with this building is just putting 2 different types of exterior finishes on there. You can see on the left-hand side, here's how the building's being radiated. You can see the brown paint is hotter. Look at what it does on the inside of a 6-inch wall. And it affects the inside of the building. And where, guess what? Next slide. Here's the same slide. You see that heat coming in at the top where the lumber is? All that cold, dark stuff in the bottom is air conditioning, more commonly known as refrigeration, using 3,000 watts an hour to produce this stuff. It's refrigeration. It doesn't belong in buildings. It's reacting to a symptom of natural UV. Next slide. Now here's where I want to get into Safety Code 6. Do you guys know what, can I have that code book? You guys, this is a BC building code. If you built a building here and phoned up Mitch in the city of Penticton and said, we don't believe you guys, we're going to just build a building and we don't want to have anything to do with you guys, it's not going to happen. This is the BC building code. This is what governs that. The same thing when we get into electrical codes. We have the Canadian Electrical Code. When it comes to the safety of these frequencies, we are governed by Health Canada's Safety Code 6. It's the law. If you guys take a look at this and when you do a search for it, do a search for it because it is the only code in the world that when I saw this Wi-Fi issue and parents talking about their kids being hurt, I contacted Health Canada and I said, what did you guys do with the frequency interaction between the kids and the routers? They said, what do you mean? They're not electric. To look through this code that says this, and this is really important even for the ITRON guys. Imagine this. Safety Code 6 uses the same standards as the FCC. Do you know that this code says this? We don't know what's causing this. We don't know the mechanism linking these frequencies to adverse health effects. So what we've done is just allow the radiation to continue. And the worst part with that is, with any code is, you're setting yourself up for failure as soon as the mechanism is found. And what I ended up doing is I got called by Canadian Parliament Standing Committee on Health, and they wanted me to testify at their committee related to this. Because they said the mechanism is missing, linking the frequencies to adverse health effects. Well, guess what? The mechanism isn't missing. They didn't treat people as electrical properties at all. See this code right here? Limits of human exposure to radio frequency electromagnetic energy in those ranges. The first thing you would do in that equation is include the frequencies of humans. There's no frequencies of humans in this at all. There is no electrical properties of humans at all. All they said is, we know we're heating tissue. We don't know what's causing it, so we're just going to let them heat up a little bit. Next slide, please. See this thing that he's talking about here? That's what they use with Safety Code 6 to determine if you're safe. And you know why they determine with meter? Now this is where this gets crazier for me. See that thing too? This is a plastic mold, like I say, with a meat probe in the head. And it fill it up with liquid. The phone is here. Even with this, imagine this. They are considering, Safety Code 6 does this. They only consider the frequencies from the phone to your head, not the tower hitting you at the same time. With the meter issues, I've heard distancing yourself from the meters makes you safe. Guess what? It doesn't make you safe. You're still getting hit by the frequencies, even if you're distancing yourself. Wi-Fi in schools, the same thing. But the idea that this is what we're using to make wireless run the world. Next slide, please. See, there's that Sam Phantom dummy right here on the left side. Here's a young man on his cell phone after an hour. Does that reflect that side of his face being lit up like that from his neck all the way up? No. As a matter of fact, different frequencies, they just say, we can't detect anything. Next slide, please. This image right here is actually of a young lady sitting right here. Barb was a professional cell phone saleswoman. She won top honors in the province of BC for her hard work in doing those things. And what they did is they used that dummy and the fact that Barb's cell phone was only at a specific power density, and power density means volts times amps, watts. You do not subject humans in vulnerable electrical anything to volts times amps. They already have their own. You see Barb right above her ear there? You see that white hot spot there? This is something they didn't pick up with that model and what's going on with Barb. And the fact that, guess what? You know, the World Health Organization talked about cell phones being a possible carcinogenic. Have you heard that? Well, guess what? That possible cancer is called glioma, and very aggressive, very aggressive. That is not typical to see on the side of somebody's head, to see that pattern. And so this is something we're actually representing for Barb in her case. That again, we're not paid for the stuff that we're doing here. Next slide, please. Here's Barb's hands. Now, the first time she came to see me, she said, will you help me? And I said, not necessarily. I said, I have to believe you first. And Barb talked about holding the phone in her hands. And while she couldn't see what I was looking at, she said, I'm burning in my hands. I'm burning in my forearm. But they said my phone couldn't do that to me. Well, you can clearly see Barb's been burned by her phone. And imagine this. If this is going into the tissue, and that test that they're using is called the specific absorption rate. So they admit you're absorbing things. When these guys talk about a power density and a low power density, they're talking about you being able to absorb some of this energy. And make no mistake about this. This isn't a low energy when you're talking about 900 megahertz, 900 million cycles per second versus 8 cycles per second. You know, there's just very serious electrical considerations with this. Next. Now you guys can go and take a look at some of that. Now can you close that off too? I want to show that little video too. Yeah, finish that off. Okay. Just do this quickly for this. Is that my one here? Okay, make it big screen. Remember, Health Canada says this. The stimulation, here's what they say as well as this. The stimulation of tissue is to be avoided. The heat effect is to be avoided. But because we didn't know what was going on, we're just heating them up a little bit. So what we did here is we subjected somebody to magnetic lines of flux with no expectations because we should see nothing. No stimulation of tissue or a heat effect. There you go. Now, one of the reasons we lecture this in medicine too is, and even for these guys here, this is something I did. When I contacted Health Canada, I said, as an employer, do I have to worry about my guys? Do I have to worry? Do I have a liability associated with this? Now, here's the worst part with this. With all the stuff that you guys showed on Health Canada, here's the amazing thing about this. Health Canada says, here's a code that says, we don't know what's causing this. But when we find out, we will use the weight of evidence approach on an ongoing basis and change the code if deemed necessary. This is what they say. September of 2010, I reported to Health Canada in my professional capacity. The mechanism linking those frequencies to adverse health effects is one, you're electromagnetically inducing them, two, they're electrical beings, and you're hurting them. So here's where Health Canada should have jumped into gear, use peer-reviewed science to disqualify us to do something. 4 weeks later, I receive a letter. Here I am, an electrical professional, and with national credentials. Health Canada sends me a letter. Thank you very much for your interest in this. We do not believe that this is doing anything. We do not have any peer-reviewed science. So what they did was they dismissed electricity as peer-reviewed science. They dismissed me. for the work that we do for them. End of October 2010, Canadian Parliament Standing Committee on Health contacts me and says, we request you to testify for Parliament on this. Same idea for Canadian Parliament. We testified for Parliament saying, these are causing problems. You have to pay attention. You are inducing them. You're inducing bees. You're causing problems. And I like what you guys are doing here versus a smart meter program. But here's that horrible thing. Do you know what Health Canada's Standing Committee came out with a report? You know what the report said? They told Health Canada, thoroughly investigate. That's what came out in December 2010. Do you know what Health Canada reports today? There's no peer-reviewed science showing that this is causing harm. There is no peer-reviewed science. They have never contacted us. Here's the worst part. They didn't tell you guys. You know, here I am working for engineers. We work for professionals on this. Imagine for me, as a building professional, I just consulted on a $200 million building in Kelowna. And to go to that structural engineer and say, do you know what these frequencies are going to do to your structure? And he said, what do you mean? I said, if these frequencies are going through walls, they're going to vibrate your structures at twice the frequencies. So if you're talking 900 megahertz, you're talking 1.8 billion times a second. You're talking about vibrating fire separations. And imagine this for me. We don't do anything to be nice. Engineers want to see code rules related to this. And part 4 of the code deals with vibration. And so here's something that just needs to be considered with this. Now here's something I really feel bad for lots of people with this, including industry, because Health Canada did not do their job in passing on this information. But making this worse, and you guys please understand this with me, I am not a conspiracy guy. We don't deal with conspiracy. You see the work we do, it's just very serious technical work. When we don't blindside anybody at the same time. But here's what happens. When I go to the BC Energy Minister as a BC credentialed energy professional and say, these smart meters, specifically dealing with smart meters at the time, these are dangerous. And here's what was lectured in Parliament, etc., etc., etc. Do you know what Rich Coleman sent to me? Here's a letter. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for your interest. Totally dismissed us in all capacities. So guess what the horrible part is from an administrative perspective? Even the engineers said to me, why didn't they bring this to us? I said, why didn't they bring it to municipalities? Why didn't Rich Coleman bring that forward to Penticton or Kelowna or any of these places? So again, you guys, they're going to open this up to questions and do those things. And there's a young lady back here. If you want to ask questions, by all means. But you guys, here's the thing for me. You can't radiate. You can't blast frequencies around. I don't care who the heck they are. Do you know what the plan is? The big plan. And this might sound like it's a good thing to do. It isn't. They are talking about smothering the whole planet. Do you know why? So we can all hook up. But here's what the horrible part is. You saw the foliage on the trees? Guess what? Imagine for me, for groundwater imaging, here I'm telling Department of Fisheries and Oceans, this is going to knock the foliage off your trees and affect fish spawning. This is going to affect your babies. The Central Maine Power Authority has already set up a special division because their smart meters are interfering with other devices. And now imagine this. Now other wireless devices are coming into that same environment. Do you know what their answers were to some of this? Move to different ends of your building to stay away from the frequencies. But imagine this. They settled claims. They hurt electrical devices. They caused them to break. They settled claims on all of this as they're moving forward. And that's what I mean. This is going to come back to haunt people for this part, for the biggest part. And again, I'm looking forward to further dialogue with this, and I applaud you guys for having this forum, okay? So we're going to talk more about this, but you guys, this is so important to you as constituents. And again, I want to say this. I want to thank the City of Penticton for being as proactive as they were. You know, this isn't happening in enough forums for us, okay? So you guys ask some good questions, but remember this, your children are at stake. And again, I don't say that lightly. Do you know that SIDS rates in BC were up 30% in 2011 over 2010? 30%, sudden infant death syndrome. Do you know what can cause that? Frequencies interacting with a vulnerable baby. Because here's what Health Canada says. Imagine this. We don't know what's causing this. The safety code says 6 says this. If they are stimulated, which is to be avoided, experimental studies show can lead to nerve and muscle stimulation. Well, try to imagine your nerves from head to toe, and hence those symptoms. So you guys really pay attention to the issue, because it's really important to you. And especially now, even with, here I am with professional engineers and fire departments talking about these frequencies going through walls and affecting your investment, affecting fire integrity. So there's just lots of considerations, okay? Thank you.
So our sincere thanks to Brian Thiessen, Curtis Bennett and Kevin Protu for their presentation. So at this time we're opening things up to the general public, the audience, to ask questions, to make a statement, to give an opinion.